Welcome to Heartbeats. Today we had Drena, Anna Lee, and Sarah talking about the myths of abortion and how this decision truly did impact their life in tremendous ways. They talked about the myth that you can have an abortion and just get on with your life no problem. You're going to be able to hear a little bit about how that journey was for them and how they found healing and redemption. Hey guys, welcome to Heartbeats. This is Jennifer Pace, and I have here with me Drena, that's with First Coast Women's Services. She's facilitated abortion healing Bible studies with us for years and years. Anna Lee, who is with Jack Set Free, who recently launched this ministry of abortion healing, but she's been in this field for at least 10 years now.
Yes.
Sarah Wong, who is our communications coordinator, who also has a story related to abortion healing. And so in this podcast, we're really focusing on dispelling myths of abortion, why our society thinks that this is an allowable thing, and really talking about it from the point of view of stories, and not a political conversation, really a conversation about real hearts, real minds who have been impacted by abortion, whether by choosing life or by choosing abortion, and really dispelling some of the myths of the reasons why our society says that this should be allowable. And so I think each one of you have a personal story that really impacts, this decision. Every single one of you have made a past choice for abortion and have realized through that choice that it doesn't just impact you mentally, it impacts you physically, impacts you emotionally, impacts you spiritually, impacts the relationships. And so as humans that are complex people, it's not just a physical act. And so I want to give each one of you an opportunity just to share a little bit about your story, and within sharing your story, what were those lies that you believed, and then how you were set free from those lies. So since I'm looking at you, Drena, why don't you start?
Sure. Well, my story sort of began before that, before the abortion, meaning that I grew up in a pretty distrusting home. I grew up with divorced parents and a single mom that worked a lot. And so what I was doing was looking for love in all the wrong places and looking for, some sort of feeling of mattering. And I ended up in a relationship with an older guy. I was 16 and he was 22. And so I was really taken advantage of in that space. I did end up pregnant, and my parents, even though they were divorced, they were of the same opinion that it was not a baby. That was the first space of not being true, a lie. And because it wasn't a baby, it was a blob of tissue. It was a circumstance or a situation to take care of. And I was a sophomore in high school. And so the position after it's not a baby is, the second conversation is, well, you can't care for it anyways. And so the best thing to do, because you can't care for it, is to have the abortion. And I was pretty complacent in what that looked like, not because I didn't know it was right or wrong, but because I was young and because I believed them. I went along with what that looked like. And it was many years later that I began to understand the pain, the physical pain that it caused me. I did not know that I was suppressing memories of the physical part of the abortion itself. Had brought it up to my mom, and my mom is the one that took me for my first abortion. And I was horrified that she was horrified over what she had done and the things that she had heard and witnessed with her own eyes. And I did go on after that, but the stage was set from that point on for me to be an enraged, angry, very rebellious, very violent teenager. I did end up having a second pregnancy when I was a senior in high school, and I did choose life. In choosing that life, I also chose a very violent spouse. And our relationship was very toxic. And I had another child at 22, and we divorced. And that's when things got really wild in my life, if they weren't already wild. But that's when I wouldn't call it, I wouldn't say that it was suicidal in the way that I had any idea that I was suicidal, but my behaviors were so destructive. Drinking and drugs and multiple part, like just so destructive. And I did end up, I ended up pregnant again, and I was numb to the truth. My whole life was numb, actually. When I go back and look, it was just numb everywhere. And the only thing that I could think was another lie is that I was already a bad mom because I'd made these choices. I was already a bad parent or mom also because, truthfully, I didn't know who the father was. I was already a single mom of 2 children. How was I supposed to do this? My parents I'm not going to say they disowned me, but they observed my behavior and were at this point pretty unwilling to help. And so I really felt like that was, I couldn't have another child. And so those are the 2 spaces that I operated in until I gave my life to Christ at 30. Yep.
So back to you, and then I'll ask some questions to Annalie and Sarah. So how did you find redemption through that? After you had the abortions and you realized, hey, I can do this. I can be a single mom. You found Christ. In what ways did God redeem your story and start to open your eyes to the lies that you had faced?
Well, when I did give my life to Christ at 30, one of the first things that came up in that was that I needed to repent, that life was given by the Creator. And I didn't know what all of that meant. I wasn't real sure as a new believer, but looking backwards, I knew that what I did was wrong. The difference is that I didn't know why it was wrong. Like, I inherently knew that it was not good, but I didn't know how was it not good or why was it not good. And when I became a Christian, it was very apparent through Scripture and through the Holy Spirit, why it was wrong. I immediately started talking about it publicly. I immediately started talking about it probably a little too open. Because it is kind of a covered space, especially in church. But I walked into First Coast Women's Services because I really felt like I needed to come alongside other women who were going to make this choice and tell them the heartache, the sadness, the sorrow, the grief that I actually felt. And when I went to First Coast Women's Services, in order to do that, we had at that time to walk through a Bible study. And I thought it was just going to be like this Bible study that was enriching, but what it actually did was it changed my life. It changed my heart. It changed the trajectory of how God would use me for His glory, to walk alongside women who, I often call it the backdoor ministry, because this is where we meet women, right? We meet women at the back door of making these decisions to bring them hope again, that they don't have to stay where they are. And so it's been 17 years, and to God be the glory.
And Annalie, you're similar, right? So you worked for First Coast Women's Services, actually, and you were able to not only share from a prevention point of view and help women who are considering an abortion to make choices for life, but then you also have successfully launched a new ministry called Jack Set Free, where you're able to provide post-abortion healing and support for women. So can you share a little bit about your story and how God led you to this path that you're on, because it really is a divinely created path?
Yeah. Yes. So I grew up in a loving Christian home, And I gave my life to Christ when I was young, 6 years old. I grew up in youth group. I grew up making good grades, following the rules, playing sports. Um, and after college, I moved away from most of my family and friends, and I had a good job and I had a nice boyfriend. But I always knew that I didn't want to marry him. I really had no business being in a relationship like that, but I thought I was behaving like a grown up, and I wasn't. I was very immature. Um, and when I found out I was pregnant, I just sank into an abyss. Um, Fear was so, it just overwhelmed and overpowered every thought that I had. So I never told anyone that I was pregnant. I didn't even tell my parents. I was too afraid. I was too afraid. I had grown up hearing a lot of derogatory terms towards women that have unplanned pregnancies. I grew up hearing slut, whore, all of those words about women that had unplanned pregnancies. And so that had an impact on me. It wasn't anyone else's fault that I chose abortion, but I was just very, very afraid in my Christian community and in my Christian family to tell everyone that I was pregnant and I wasn't married and I didn't want to be with the father of the baby. Um, so I found out I was pregnant on a Saturday, and by the next weekend, I had gone to an abortion clinic and obtained the pills, and I had a medication abortion at home. And it was the most disturbing day of my life. I have since then had 3 beautiful children, and I have also had a miscarriage, but none of them compare to the pain that I suffered that day that I aborted my child. Um, so I did end up moving back home around family, but I still told no one. I was so just in a pit of shame and fear and disgrace. So I went years just in silence. I was locked in the prison of silence. And it wasn't until another bad breakup that I had, 'cause of course, I've kept dating the wrong men for the wrong reasons. And my mom suggested that I go see a Christian counselor. Um, and I never intended to tell the counselor that I'd had an abortion, but after our first session together, just a floodgate of sorrow came out of me, and I told her everything. And it was a divine appointment because she proceeded to tell me that she too had had an abortion, and she'd spent all of her years researching the negative effects that it has on women. So through those sessions with that counselor, I found healing, and I really learned what I had known as a Christian and as a follower of Jesus in my youth. I really learned the power of what Jesus did on the cross, that it's big enough for all sin, even the sin of abortion. And somehow in my mind, abortion wasn't part of that. That sin was too big, and so, but I came to an understanding of that and found forgiveness and healing. And then, like Drena, well, then I wanted to go and help, other women. We have to tell them, they have to understand how horrible abortion is and what a lie it is. It doesn't solve your problems. It doesn't make anything better. It makes everything worse. It did for me. And so I contacted First Coast Women's Services, went in, I wanted to volunteer. And because of my abortion, they asked that I go through the Forgiven and Set Free Bible study, the same one Drena was referring to. And I was really kind of mad about it because I thought, well, I've already had healing. I've seen a counselor and I've asked for forgiveness, and I know God and he loves me and he forgives me, and what else. But I went through the study and learned that, like we were talking about on the phone, healing is a continual encounter with Jesus. It's as wide and deep as his love. And so it goes on and on. And so I went through the study and found even more healing and realized that truth that, healing is a vast, deep, wonderful well. And so now, I've facilitated groups for years, and now we have Jack Set Free, and Jack Set Free utilizes the Forgiven and Set Free Bible study. So God has, it's wonderful to watch him moving, not just my life, but in so many lives.
Yeah, I think that when we talk about abortion, it's easy to think that it's just one group of people that considers an abortion, just like the 20-year-old person who is not married and has an unplanned pregnancy. But we learned that there's many faces of abortion. You know, it could be a married woman, it could be an unmarried woman, it could be a teenager, it could be someone who's 40 who's had multiple children. And so one staggering fact is that 1 out of 4 women by the time that they're 45 will have had an abortion. And so this is something that we know statistically that hits home on every front. You know, this is something that's is real and tangible, and it's those stats are the same in the Christian households as they are in the secular households, because even though a woman might consider an abortion for different reasons, there's a similar thread that runs through all of them, and that is fear.
That's
you know,
right.
there's a fear of the unknown, a fear of what people might think. There's an underlying fear, and so what takes away the fear is to be able to expose the truth, right? And so I think that you guys are really sharing a lot of truth today and helping, I prayerfully helping some people who might even be considering an abortion right now understand that there are real lasting impacts of abortion. So Sarah, your story's a little different from Annalee's, and I love that your all stories kind of are opposite, because Annalee, you were from a Christian household and still chose abortion because of that fear and that shame of, hey, I had this Christian background, and what would that look like? Sarah, you have a very different story. Do you mind sharing?
Yeah, thank you. So I was actually adopted as a baby into a very secular, liberal home. My dad was a professor at UC Berkeley, and I grew up close to the Berkeley area. So that's like a very just liberal area. And, you know, I took health class and all of that growing up, and things like abortion were just a part of health care. Like that's what they say. It's healthcare, right? Abortion is healthcare.
That's one of the
another
myths.
big myth. Yeah. And so that was my mindset growing up. In fact, the pro-life stance to me growing up felt so hateful, which is crazy to me to think about now, because the choice to give life is full of love, but ending a life is death. And really, that's what abortion ultimately is. And I was about 23 when I got pregnant, and I was with my ex-boyfriend at the time. And I just knew immediately, actually, funny enough, when we conceived, I knew I got pregnant when we conceived, because it felt different. And I just have like a kind of crazy bodily awareness, but I knew I got pregnant. And I knew immediately, like you, Annalee, that I needed to end the pregnancy. And I had nobody in my life. And I actually did tell my family, and they all were right on board with the abortion, because they too were in that mindset that abortion is healthcare. And if you're not ready to have a baby, then abortion is the right choice. So I went to Planned Parenthood, and they didn't in any way object the pregnancy. They didn't in any way offer any sort of supportive services or anything to encourage life. I went in there, said I wanted an abortion. They were like, okay, here you go. And I too received the pill, the abortion pill, because I did find out very, very early on. And for many years, I kind of justified it in my mind, because I was probably about maybe 3 or 4 weeks when I had the medical abortion. And I remember it was really traumatizing, similar to you, Annalee. It was the most traumatizing day of my life. I remember, being by myself, sitting on the toilet, literally seeing this little being come out of me. And I could not believe I was 4 weeks in, and I could already tell, that's another myth, is that they say it's just a clump of cells. And it wasn't just a clump of cells. Like I could tell that it was a human life forming inside of me, and the guilt that I immediately felt. But then I spent years after that kind of justifying. And within a week of having the abortion, I was doing hard drugs. I never really did hard drugs. I had, done like drinking and kind of like casual smoking a little bit of weed. But after the abortion, somebody offered to, do more hard drugs. And I was like, yeah, and I had no clue after I went down that path of addiction and substance abuse for probably the next 3 or 4 years, I had no clue that the abortion was really the kind of starting point of all of that, and that I was masking and covering up so much of that pain. And it was maybe about 5 or 6 years after that I kind of had that realization that the abortion was causing a lot of these issues that I was facing. And I had to kind of come to Jesus with all of it. And I did. I ended up giving my life over to Christ. There was kind of a whole piece of my testimony story that is separate from the abortion, but it really was the turning point that really took me from, I felt like I was going somewhere in life. I had my degree and I was building my young career. And as a 23-year-old woman, I had no clue that choice to have that abortion was going to negatively impact my life the way that it did. And it took years and years and years after, and just lots of various types of healing. And I actually haven't been through the Forgiven and Set Free course yet, but I'm going to.
That's awesome.
So I'm going to be taking that course, and I have no clue what God has in store for me with, sitting next
No,
to you two.
you don't. It's
sitting
awesome.
next to you two women who
It's
have
good.
been through it.
Yes.
So I'm very excited to, like you, Annalee, you said, I've already healed so much, but I've never been through a course like Forgiven and Set Free where it's biblically rooted. That's and right. I'm going through it with other women that too have experienced abortion in various ways. And I am just really excited about, the even further healing that God will offer to me. And yeah, that's just been, a little bit of my story. Yeah.
So what I'm thankful because we have this opportunity to share that there's hope. That there's hope, there's healing, there's forgiveness that's accessible. There's many churches who will allow First Coast Women's Services to come and share about what we do. And one of the things that I love, and it's beautiful, but it breaks my heart every single time, is if we get the opportunity to at least give an announcement and say, okay, this is First Coast Women's Services. This is what we do. We provide, support services to women facing unplanned pregnancies. It is guaranteed that at least one person, at the very least one person, comes up to me and says, I've never told a soul, but I had an abortion. And what's mind-boggling to me is that it's not always the 20-year-old, the 30-year-old. A lot of times it's that 70-year-old woman, 60-year-old woman who said, I bought the lie 50 years ago, and still at the thought of talking about it is weeping. And so one of the lies that I'm hoping that we're dispelling today is that you can have the abortion and just get on with your life. Because, I've seen so many times that a woman will suffer with that decision until she does find hope and healing, until she does come into a realization of the forgiveness that she can have. And so, one thing that we've noticed too is with the call center, and the prevalence of the abortion pills being so readily available and women taking them, right away, is that it used to be that women would come later in life and say, I want healing, I want forgiveness. But now we're seeing a prevalence where there's more and more women who are really closely post-abortive, maybe 5 months, 6 months, 7 down the road, and they just cannot get over the fact of what had happened and what they experienced, because the chemical abortion, the medical abortion is so traumatic. And that's another lie that the abortion industry promotes, is that, it's no big deal, it's like a period, it's like
in the comfort of your own home and your own privacy.
Right. So can you talk a little bit about that and some of the women that you've talked to recently?
Yeah, I think when you were speaking about the abortion pill, I think it is such a lie that it's easier, that it's private, and that it's safe. I had my medical abortion, which is abortion by the pill, 20 years ago. It was not safe. It was very gory. It is still a trauma that I have to find continual healing for, the visual of the memories of it. It's not safe. I think that, I mean, just to be very open and honest. I had, you get a fever. It was 105 fever and sweating and with all the gore. And I mean, I thought that I was also going to die. And so it's just a lie that it's easy and, private is easier. And so when we have had at Jack Set Free, we have had more younger women coming in that have had the medical abortions at home. And they're recognizing that this isn't right. This isn't right. And they're coming for healing much closer to their abortion than the previous 10 years when I was facilitating. I don't, maybe you can speak to the same thing, Drena.
Yeah, volunteering for First Coast Women's Services and having direct access to the call center and those women that call, because when they do call, we reach out immediately within 24 hours to be able to speak directly with them. And as far as being sooner, I think that the earliest that I've actually had conversations with women are 3 weeks. They knew immediately the devastation. And I think that's partly because of the conversation, but also partly because in these medical abortions, they are seeing things, that is just another layer of the trauma that's added on top of the taking of the life. With my abortion, it was done in secret. It was done in the hidden place. Even though I was surrounded by medical providers and other women who came and sat in the same chairs I did, it was done in the dark. This is not in the dark. It's open and it's painful. Whereas to some of the other types of abortions, you might be sedated or you might have pain medication. And I'm not saying that those are right or more wrong, but there is the extra layer of seeing as proof that what you've done has ended life. And so that's a whole other element of desiring healing, because we've never been able to visually see the devastation of what that looks like. I've talked to women who are still testing positive in their pregnancies. It's been so close. And we are running a class where right now the youngest is 19 and she's 6 months out, and the oldest is 71 and she's 51 years. So my hope with First Coast Women's Services is that we take that gap of those that are waiting 51 years and we tell the truth that there is no gap that's too far, too wide, that there's healing for everyone who seeks healing, and there's availability, and to not wait in the dark, in the ditch for 50 years. We want that for women. Come as soon as you're prompted, come.
Yeah, one thing that people don't realize too, just with the name of First Coast Women's Services, that we only reached out to women, but there are impacts that men face as well.
Yes.
Who are either the participant in, not standing up for life, or the one who pressuring the person to have an abortion. So, men do face the impacts of abortion.
Yes.
I was interviewing a volunteer, whose partner had an abortion against his will,
Yeah.
And I don't think, and again, as a grown man, as a 70-year-old man, still brought him to tears talking about it, because who would have known that he would be in that situation? And so it's something that I think is a myth, that it's a woman's issue. And it's not just a woman's issue. This is something that impacts male, female, married, unmarried. It affects every single part of our population.
It affects those that are not even just the father and the mother. It affects grandmothers. It affects siblings. It affects friends who took friends. I mean, there's a ripple effect of the effects of what that actually looks like. But yes, I've counseled and led others in what does that look like for their role, how does that, is there freedom for them? And the answer is yes. Yes, there is.
I mean, I can just say in my case, I definitely fell into that myth that it's my choice. It's my body, my choice. And when I got pregnant and told my ex-boyfriend at the time, he too was kind of raised in a similar society, in that secular worldview. And I just think back to the conversations that we had where I was just so certain that this is what I had to do, and just seeing all over his face him wanting to say, I want you to keep this child, but he didn't. And he felt silence, and he felt like he couldn't tell me the truth. And funny enough, he was actually cheating on me at the time, and he ended up getting married and has kids with that woman. And it's just, it goes to prove, like, he wanted a family. He wanted to have, and we did have a good, healthy relationship. Like, he was a really sweet, wonderful person. And like, that myth, that destruction, I mean, he was the best relationship that I had. And I now have a boyfriend, but I spent basically 8-9 years completely single and alone, and incapable really of being in another relationship because of the damage. And I had no clue all those years that it was the abortion that was creating so much of that trauma and destruction, and really my inability to be in a relationship, because I felt unworthy. I felt like I'm not worthy of being a girlfriend or a wife or a mother. And, if I could make that choice, I think especially as I went through the healing, there was that kind of like anger phase, that rage phase of like, I can't believe that I made this choice and I left him out and he wanted to keep the baby and all of those things. So, it, to the men out there, like, your feeling and your desire to keep a child matters. And if you are in a case where your girlfriend is pregnant and she's considering abortion, like, don't be afraid to tell her how you feel. Exactly. Tell her the truth, because you could save your baby's life. Had my boyfriend spoken up a little bit more, fought for that life, who knows what decision I would have made.
Sure.
Yeah.
That's really good. Well, thank you all for sharing and opening up your hearts. And it's very vulnerable to be able to share these very intimate parts of your life. But I think it's really for the betterment of other people. So I'm going to give you each an opportunity to say just one last thing that is on your heart that you feel like someone would need to know. But if Sarah, if you'll share with us, if a woman's facing an unplanned pregnancy, how would they get involved with First Coast Women's Services, as well as any concluding thoughts? And then if you both would share, how would they get involved with your healing programs?
Yeah, so they text us, call us, reach out to us in any way you can. Come in, drop into the center, and come and just let us know that you need abortion healing. We do a lot of volunteering and outreach to various churches, and like you mentioned earlier, even if you happen to stumble upon us somewhere, and just reach out and let us know that you want to sign up for one of the abortion healing classes. And we're working in partnership with both Drena and Anna Lee with their organizations for those healing classes. And I just want to also say that I didn't have a First Coast Women's Services in my life, and what a blessing it is to know that something like First Coast Women's Services exists, so that other women, that are hiding in the shadows and that feel that this is the only choice that they could possibly have, that they can know that there is healing, there is hope out there, and that if you've been just struggling with this choice for a long time, just know that all three of us sitting here are living proof that redemption is possible, and it really does come through Christ alone. And I think all three of our stories, we truly were only redeemed through Christ and giving our life and repenting to him, and returning that. And like you said, it's a continuous thing. It's not one thing. It's not something that happens one time. It happens over and over again. And we just want every woman out there to know that there is hope, and there's healing available, and we have it right here for you.
Yeah. At Jack Set Free, we say choose healing, because healing is a choice. So you can find us on our website, jacksetfree.org. And there's a place where you can fill out an interest form, and we'll just call you and tell you about the program that we offer. We use the Forgiven and Set Free Bible Study. We operate on a semester-style schedule, so we have 2 classes coming up right now for the fall, and then in January we'll have some more. So, yeah, we're just hoping that abortion healing gets spread far and wide, especially in Jacksonville and the city that we love and the communities surrounding Jacksonville, because healing is available, and you can be whole and be free.
I give an amen to that. That is true. I have so much to say. Last point. Okay, so First Coast Women's Services offers a 1-day class. We offer the class on Saturdays. You can check out the schedule online. It is from 9 to 4:30. We provide lunch, and it's a session that we call an introductory type of class where it's small group, so it's usually between 4 to 6 women, myself leading, and what we talk about are the hard things fast. What it usually leads to is an understanding that there is a community of women that are just like you, who are struggling, who need help, but want to talk about it freely, in confidence, but maybe don't have the time to take a longer study. Most of the participants that come through at the end of the day feel a sense of relief having shared for the first time their abortion experience, but often what they come to realize is that they actually do need healing. They actually need longer, more in-depth conversations that's biblically based, and there are often times at the end of the class where we will refer to Jack Set Free for a longer study, because their eyes are opened that what they thought was done isn't actually done, that God has a bigger plan for their story and that choice. And so we want to encourage, and this class is actually open to men and women. We'd like to offer it also to those who participated in abortion and have guilt over that. We would like to invite those people to the space also. And so just contact First Coast Women's Services for more information.
And if there's someone that you know that's facing an unplanned pregnancy, then we have 6 locations here in the Jacksonville area, 3 in Duval, 1 in Baker, 1 in Clay, and 1 in St. Johns County. We also have a call center, and that number is 904-915-HELP. So if you know someone who's really wrestling with this decision of considering having an abortion and wants a safe person to talk to and wants to be able to talk to a registered nurse who can give them the real information about what abortion really does entail and helps them to weigh out those consequences, that would be such a life-giving thing for you to be able to provide that person. And you can find that information again at fcws.org or the number 904-915-HELP. Thank you guys.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jen.
Thank you.
much.
Thank you so much for listening today. If you'd like to make an investment to save lives and transform generations, then I would ask you to go to friendsoffirstcoast.org and make a donation today to continue the life-saving impact in our community.